Hey, Snack Pack, snacking here, putting the carrot in your cake, if you know what I mean. Bringing you some musings again. I've had a lot to think about. I've got a lot on my mind, other than just this extremely large cranium that sits on top of my shoulders and puts weight on my brain. I've been wondering about DPS. It seems like we use half our kit, and I'll explain that statement in a second. So, I've been thinking a lot about this. I even tried to make a video on it over a week ago, and I just could not, for the life of me, get my thoughts together. So I spent some time actually writing a little bit of a bullet point. I'm going on script for this one to try and get this thought out. So let's start with roles for just a minute. Your tanks. Tanks I understand very well. Tanks have basically 3 jobs that they do. They make space, they protect their team, and they break fortifications. And if you don't know what I mean by make space, you know, they push in and they push the enemy back so that other heroes can get in and do their jobs. Now, support. I went looking on the internet for what supports do. And I got a little less defined information. So I reached my over-ample fingers into my over-ample butt and pulled this out. Support does basically 2 things, right? They sustain the team and they direct the flow of battle. And they do this with heals and buffs or debuffs. Mostly Zen, right? I think Zen is the only debuffer. Mercy obviously has her buff with her damage increase, her damage boost. Now other heroes do this too. For instance, Orisa has, you know, a buffer in the form of her ultimate. But in general, it's not a tank's job to buff the team. In general, it is the support's job to buff the team and provide heals so that you have the sustain necessary to do your jobs. And that's what support does. Now, when I went looking for what DPS does on the internet, I got even less of a response. I mean, it's almost like Trump's political group is out there scrubbing the internet for what DPS does. It was amazing to me that there was just no set of definitions, right, for damage dealers. And I keep saying DPS. It's not really DPS, not in Overwatch, right? It's really damage dealers. But I will conflate the terms because I'm old and well, kind of lazy. So, what are your damage dealers? What are they supposed to do? And the first answer everyone says is, well, they kill things. Right? It's in the name. They do damage. Right? They shoot shit. I don't think it's that simple in Overwatch. Overwatch is an extremely complex game. Nateson put up a great video on how complex Overwatch can be. He talked about this in relation to something else. You've got 24 heroes, all with different abilities, all that counter each other. So depending on what's on the board and what the other team has, your group may be forced to change to pick up heroes that better counter their heroes in any given particular, you know, context. So, and that's what's meant by counterplay. So, what is the job of DPS if it's not to shoot stuff? And I kind of look at it this way: if the tanks make space, the DPS need to utilize space, and they need to control space, right? So, whether it's Tracer flanking, or Reaper, you know, Wraith forming somewhere, or Soldier simply moving in behind Reinhardt, you DPS players, you need to control that space. You need to utilize that space to the best of your ability to shut down the enemy, to shut down their supports, well, you know, to eliminate them. The other thing I think DPS does, or could do, is you enable the team, right? And you enable the team through your abilities. Whether it's Sombra hacking an enemy, or Tracer using her pulse bomb, or you know, Junkrat using a Riptire. Junkrat's great at controlling space. That's what the... I know they've mixed them all together, but that's what the defense definition used to be, right? Is they were damage dealers that could control an area, right? That's why May is what she is too, right? Is they controlled an area. Symmetra, the new Symmetra, I think if we had the old damage and defense categories, I think Symmetra would fall in defense. Still, she certainly isn't support because she didn't have, well, she did have sustain through her shield generator, but she didn't really directly enable the team. So they switched her over to what they're calling damage, and I think she'd end up in defense along with Torb. I just think that's where she would be. So, damage dealers, you utilize or control space. You enable your team through the use of your abilities, and then your other job is you help protect the team by, you know, peeling and kiting, choosing your targets appropriately. So when that Tracer is flanking on your back line, you might need to peel to help. I think what we do as a community is we confuse or we conflate how a damage dealer achieves their jobs of utilizing space, enabling your team, and protecting your team with how we confuse the what with the how, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They achieve their goals by doing damage and using abilities. So where am I going with all of this crap? Well, it's the idea, and it's just an idea, that we have primary and secondary damage dealers. I actually had a guy laugh at me when I was in Spawn talking about this. And well, you know, it takes all types. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure he's good for, you know, plowing his field or fertilizing or whatever it is he does. But I just feel like we're missing out on half of our kit, because when we think of damage dealers, we take raw damage, right? We want Reaper Farah because they both have mobility and they're both really strong and they put out a shit ton of damage. Or we want, you know, I don't know, Widow Junk or whatever the combination is. But because they don't put out the same amount of damage, unless we're stalling, in general, we don't take May. Every once in a while, some brave soul will pull her out, but for the most part, you see May when you're going to stall. You see Bastion when you're going to pirate ship. Now, never mind, Bastion has a recon mode, and it's not as good as Soldier, but it's about 80-85% there. I mean,
not good.
It's Bastion's recon mode isn't that much different from Soldier, right? And he even has heals. It's self heal and not team heal. Bastion has a lot of sustain, but we use Bastion for pirate ship because for some reason, if he's not in turret mode, we don't think he can kill things, and that is absolutely not true.
You should be.
Sombra, Symmetra. Like I said, we use May on stalls. The sniper meta is very strong, so that's changed, right? Hanzo is no longer a troll pick, and having been killed by Hanzo many times, I can attest to this. As support, he picks me out a lot. But again, as a community, I feel like we're only using half our kit because we confuse how damage dealers do their jobs versus what their jobs really are, right? Because even though the easiest way, well, I say easiest, to win your objectives in Overwatch competitive is to kill the enemy. Because if the enemy's dead, there's no one to contest the payload. There's no one to contest the point. It isn't necessarily the victory condition that you kill everyone, right? The victory condition depends upon the map type, you know, whether you're King of the Hill or payload or whatever. And then it depends in part on the enemy team, because the victory condition could be we must kill their widow because she's tearing us up. That could become part of the victory condition. But the victory condition certainly isn't we have to murder the entire team all the time. That is not the victory condition. That might be how you achieve your victory condition, right? Because we have to go through the entire team to get to the widow, potentially. Or we could get a Winston. That's, you know, again, counterplay, right? Or we get a widow that can counter the other widow. That's, again, a form of counterplay. Although, to quote Futurama, and I'll try to find a link to this on YouTube, perfectly symmetrical violence never solved anything. So I know that at the upper levels, at the Grandmaster level, Widow counters Widow, because you've got two people with amazing aim, and she can just grapple away, although the grapple time is going down, which will give, you know, the Winstons, who apparently there's a thing called a butt jump, where you jump in and turn around, she shoots you in the ass, and then you turn back around and you start, you know, using your Tesla cannon on her before she can grapple away. But with the new Sombra, you know, that might give the new Sombra opportunities to go invisible, which very soon will be unlimited. Go invisible, throw the translocator in a sneaky spot, get behind the Widow, hack her so she can't get away, and then focus her down, because that submachine gun will do out damage Widow's machine gun. Sombra will do more damage, short range, than Widow will. Unless it's just a God Widow who can, you know, scope in and hit the Sombra at, you know, close to point blank, which is possible, but not very likely. Again, we're using half our kit. We just are. And I hope that people will start using some of these, what I would say, secondary DPS, and mix them with a primary DPS, which would be, you know, Pharah, Tracer, Reaper, Soldier type damage. Hanzo, even, McCree. So, high impact mixed with an enabling DPS, right? Someone who can freeze, someone who can hack, someone who can, you know, whatever the ability is at the time. Again, so I think this idea of primary and secondary DPS ought to come into our tactical discussions, and maybe it will enable us to get some easier victories than what we do than the grind that we do today. Yeah, it's just something I think about. Maybe I'm just full of crap. Well, we know I'm full of crap, but that doesn't mean I don't have a point, other than the one on my head. Anyway, that's my thoughts for today. Snacking ass.
That's actually really good.
I didn't die that second round.